Welcome to Splitting Atoms, the podcast where we dive in on the stories of nuclear in Canada. Today is Chapter 1. Lucky you, our first guest. We are going to dive in on the story or the state of nuclear within Canada. And what a better place to do that than here, up in Ottawa. Sitting with me is John Gorman, President and CEO of the Canadian Nuclear Association. And we are filming at the Westin because down below us right now is day one of the Canadian Nuclear Association conference. So,
day one, that's right.
Yeah, happy day one, John.
Thank you.
And
Thank
you've taken time to spend up here, which I'm sure you're probably a hot commodity down there right now because you're the fearless leader.
I am delighted to be with you, Caitlin, and away from the fray for a few minutes.
Yeah.
I feel bad if this is chapter one, that we may be chasing your listeners away already. I'm a little bit nervous about that, but delighted to be here.
There's so many things about nuclear that people don't really realize, which of course is of any industry, but I don't think maybe a lot of people in our audience or even people in my own life, when I tell them some of the things that we have going on in nuclear or some of the byproducts of our industry, their response is usually, that's pretty cool. I didn't know that. So, but first, before we dive into the industry, number one, this is my fourth or fifth conference, and you came on board in 2019. So it's got to be what now? Your fifth conference, if my math is...
Well, I've been here 5 years, but this is my fourth conference.
Okay. Yeah. So we've both been at the last four conferences, and we have yet to meet. So I'm sad that it's taken us this long. Right. But what an introduction. Like we were capturing it here.
Okay, just you saying that, like let's think about this. 4 years ago, we could not find a federal minister in Canada to say the word nuclear behind a microphone.
Of course, yeah.
And so that's the sort of industry, the state of play when I joined and when you had your first conference.
Yeah.
And today, of course, there's a nuclear renaissance that's underway. The recognition that nuclear is going to be essential for us, meeting our climate goals and going forward, and that Canada's a real leader in this area. I mean, that's plain now, and the support is there. So it's been a very exciting time, right?
And you are no stranger to energy as a whole, not just nuclear, but you have quite an intricate background with many different areas, and you've represented our country in some very interesting ways. So could you tell myself and the audience a little bit about that storyline? We'll keep it brief, but
sure.
So starting when you were an infant, go.
Maybe I'll just start with my introduction to electricity.
Okay.
And that was it's still quite a ways ago, I got to say. Now, I think it's this would have been in about 2000, so 23 years ago. And we were, my wife Lee and I were just starting our family at that time. And believe it or not, climate change, global warming had just registered on my radar.
Really?
Which seems kind of wild, doesn't it?
Because I feel it came in later than that. Like
you feel it came in later. There were people, certainly in the 1980s, it was becoming a mainstream thing. But for me, it dawned on my consciousness at that time when we were starting a young family, and so I made the decision that I wanted to marry what I did during the day, my day job, with something I felt was important, and so climate change, global warming was that thing. But I don't think that I realized. In fact, I'll just say I did not recognize at the time that clean electricity is the most important switch that we can make. So switching from fossil fuels to emissions-free electricity is point blank the most important thing that the world can do in terms of lowering the amount of carbon emissions we're putting out. So while I just sort of jumped on electricity at the time because solar and wind were becoming a going concern, and I thought, well, here's a place I could make a difference. So I got involved with solar in particular, and through a number of different capacities, including being the head of the Canadian Solar Association, a developer, CanCORE, right, exactly. Spent a lot of time there. And then just to bring this sort of story to an end, I'll say two things. One is just this recognition as I've gone along that clean electricity and switching over from those fossil fuels is the most important thing we can do. And so I'm delighted to be part of the electricity industry. But at a certain point, solar and wind were doing really well. They were understood. The price point had come down. And I thought, this is just not going to be enough. We're going to need more. We're going to need a lot more clean electricity. And so I started to look into nuclear. And that brought me into this industry about 5 years ago.
I think I read somewhere, if we were to eliminate globally natural gas and coal as an energy source, it would do something like decrease CO2 emissions by an astronomical number. I think it was 80 or like 80 million.
It's a huge number.
tons.
I think it's the most significant thing that we can do is switch away from creating electricity through fossil fuels if we're lowering emissions. There are many, many areas, right? Transportation, buildings, industrial processes. But the way that we create electricity, which around the world right now is primarily through coal and gas burning technologies, that is the biggest culprit, and we have to address that.
The Canadian Nuclear Association, you serve as our national voice for this industry. So what does that entail? How do you essentially represent this industry and move that forward to get in front of audiences like this one and inform them, I suppose?
Let me say, firstly, a lot easier to do it than you would think.
Okay.
When you consider that
you went the opposite. Most people, I have a very hard job. So you're saying
no, I don't know why
cakewalk.
I don't know why they pay. They don't even have to pay me for this. But the reason it's easy is, Canada has the entire nuclear ecosystem. And by that I mean we do everything from mining the uranium.
Yes, which is
the second
step one.
Step one, mine the uranium. That's Saskatchewan, the largest. We're the second largest exporter of uranium in the world. So we've got the fuel.
Yeah.
We've had the CANDO technology for the last 60 years. Canadian-made technology. It uses natural uranium, right?
And I think some people don't realize, I don't know if I realized before entering the industry, there are different reactors. Not all nuclear reactors where the magic happens are the same. And ours are some of the safest in the world, because I know safety, you say a lot of politicians back in the day wouldn't even say the word nuclear, because I think people hear that word and they think nuclear.
Right.
Not all reactors are the same.
No, I mean,
is incredible.
Canada, of nuclear generally, but Canada, one of the best, if not the best, safety records in the world. We've exported CANDO to many different countries. We have the best regulator in the world. We create the uranium. We've been using it in our own CANDO technology for the last 60 years. And we have these. We've got these amazing utilities that operate the nuclear. I mean, just think Ontario gets, almost 2/3 of its electricity from nuclear.
Which I don't think people know that.
2 of every 3 of these lights that you've got on me right now, being powered by nuclear. And then we've got these incredible laboratories and universities that have all this great stuff. And we produce medical isotopes. So nuclear science, big thing. Maybe you're going to be asking me about that. But
it is. You're
jumping
leader. Ahead. You're a good student. You're getting ahead of the teacher.
So we have this incredible ecosystem. And you'd think, John, that must make your job difficult. But the reality is that Canada's a pretty small country from a population point of view. We've got a very tight nuclear community. The collaboration that we have between all of these different pieces that I mentioned has made our job at the association of pushing for the best policies and the best market structures for Canadians to be able to have access to low-cost, clean electricity and medical isotopes. That's our job, fundamentally.
And consistent energy.
And consistent,
because you had mentioned,
reliable.
I think a lot of people think clean energy, green energy. They think of solar or wind, but you don't necessarily think of the fact that that is not consistent energy. If the sun's not shining, if the wind's not blowing, I almost said winding.
That's the technical. It's the technical term.
That's what us in nuclear call the wind winding.
Yeah.
But if those things are not happening, where is the source coming from? Whereas with nuclear, we have a consistent power source going into the grid. So for me, I know I love my lifestyle. I care about the environment, and I want to be able to afford the energy I'm consuming, and I want to fight cancer, but I also want to be able to plug my car in and get my phone going and turn all the lights on and use all of the electricity that our lifestyles have got us accustomed to. And so I think for me, when I look at nuclear, it is probably the most realistic option that checks those boxes for me, makes me feel good about what we're doing for the world and combating some of the biggest challenges that our generations will face, but still being selfish enough where it's hard to change what you've got accustomed to. So I would say that's kind of a storyline that a lot of people don't really realize. If you want your lifestyle, but you care about some of these things, nuclear is something you should probably know a little bit about and maybe dive into a little bit more.
I think that last part is absolutely true.
The I'm selfish part.
The selfish part. The part about the world, Canada needing nuclear as we. I mean, we could literally cannot get to a future that is emissions free, with abundant electricity at an affordable cost for everyone without a lot of nuclear. And as much, Caitlin, as much as I love hearing you be a champion for nuclear, and I do, I mean, awesome. My view is a little bit different, though. My view is a little bit different. And that is, the challenge that the world faces in terms of essentially needing to double or triple the amount of electricity generation that we have right now, by 2050, so that's only 27 years away. So imagine all of your listeners right now are thinking, thinking about the United States and Canada being powered by electricity. Imagine having to double or triple that, probably triple, and all of it having to be emissions free. That only leaves you with a few technologies: water power, nuclear, wind, and solar, and maybe gas if you can combine it with carbon capture and storage to make sure it doesn't give emissions.
Which, don't worry, we don't have to learn about that today.
We don't have to learn about that. So there's two things: the nuclear and the nuclear and the water power. Those are what we call baseload power.
Yes.
And to your point, they're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. Doesn't matter what the weather is. Consistent baseload. Just
the factory's
punching
always
away.
open.
Factories are open. And then you have wind and solar, which are available when the wind is blowing and the sun is shining. And they bring important things to the mix as well. So I guess but in their own way. So it's in their own way. And so the bottom line is, the way to get the most reliable electricity system and affordable electricity system and clean electricity system is by taking those technologies and having them in the right balance at the right time.
Yeah.
And so we need all of these technologies, but we're not going to be able to do it without a lot of nuclear.
That is a fair point. And like I said, I didn't mean to. The last thing I ever want to do is maybe look badly upon other industries, because I do think we all serve a different importance, right? There has to be a matrix. Right. We can't put all eggs in one basket. But so that's good. Thank you for bringing it up, putting me in my place.
But stay pro-nuclear. This splitting atoms is all about.
With splitting atoms. Is here to stay. And I think what I find fascinating is Canada. You talked briefly about our global influence. We've always had a really significant influence in nuclear, from the science and technology, CANDU reactors, but even I think back in the 1930s, one of the first designs was done here in Ottawa. Yeah. So how are we seeing that continue forward as other countries or places in the world are starting to develop their technology systems?
This is what is. I'm so glad you brought this up, and this is what's so amazing about Canada and nuclear. As we said, we got a large geography but a small population, and Canada, even though we're small by that metric, has been for more than 60 years a world leader with nuclear. And continues to be a world leader. That's true not only with the conventional reactors that we have, the CANDU reactors, the big ones that have been exported to a number of other countries around the world, and our medical isotope business, but also with the next generation of nuclear that's coming out. These are called small modular reactors and micro reactors. They're the latest generation of nuclear technology. They are scalable, really scalable. So the smallest ones you can fit on the back of an 18-wheeler and drive it into a mining community or to an indigenous northern community, for example.
So very accessible as well.
Very accessible, producing heat and power. And then they scale up so that you can right size them for the right size of electricity grid or for other applications. So nuclear not only has this incredible history with conventional reactors and their their successful operation, but now is leading the world in terms of rolling out these small modular reactors. And because of that, we are really being watched by the rest of the world. It's really mind-blowing, to be a Canadian representative of the nuclear sector at this time when we're facing, the crises of climate change and energy security from Russia's invasion of Ukraine, to be so well regarded on the international stage. So I'm really excited about what we're doing here at home, but I'm also excited about what we can do for other nations around the world with
We're an
nuclear.
influencer of sorts.
We are. And as a small nation, there's only a handful of things that we're really good at, in comparison to others, and nuclear is one of them.
Hockey, nuclear.
Yeah, we got to protect both of those things. Yeah, new sport, splitting atoms.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
The Splitting Atoms team. I can design the jerseys. I can see it now. So that's very interesting with small modular reactors, SMRs. So not only would they be scalable to communities, so it can grow with a community, but right now we see nuclear really collected in Ontario with our providers here and New Brunswick. Would this open the door for the rest of the country to bring this power source into their own backyards?
So yes.
I knew it. I was on to something.
Actually, Kate, this is precisely what is happening right now. And so what we see is, to your point, Ontario, New Brunswick, many decades in operating CANDU reactors, providing a lot of their electricity, right? 2/3 in Ontario, 1/3 in New Brunswick. These requirements that we were talking about, the need to produce a lot more emissions-free electricity and switch away from fossil fuels and everything that we do so that we can create that clean future, that requires more electricity to be adopted in other places. And these small modular reactors, because they're so scalable and you can make them the right size. Well, essentially. Yeah. And so that means that smaller populations, like Saskatchewan, for example, has a very small population. Yeah. You're not going to take one of these Bruce Power plants and put them in Saskatchewan. And Bruce Power is the largest nuclear plant in the world operating in Ontario, and the grid literally couldn't handle it. But that's why Saskatchewan has made the decision to build out, I think they've announced 4 small modular reactors now. So they're in the process of being the first province in Canada, new province to be adopting nuclear. Alberta just announced that they're doing a small modular reactor study, and they'll be building out small modular reactors. Quebec is looking at refurbishing their Gentilly 2, their nuclear site, and they're looking at small modular reactors. So,
which we'll have to get into refurbishment at one point. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, we should touch on that for sure.
I think of refurbishment. I go to Walt Disney World a lot. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you know this. And I know what it means to refurbish a amusement park, right? A ride. Mm-hmm. But to refurbish a power plant, like what's that? And that might be, so in my next chapter, I'm talking to Mike Renchik of Bruce Power. That might be a good one.
Make sure you speak to him about that.
Yeah, what does that look like?
Yeah, just as a little side note here, because you're saying Canada, why is Canada being viewed as a world leader?
Yeah. Part
of the reason, and what you should speak to Mike Renchik about, is we are pulling off the largest infrastructure project in Canada right now, $26 billion. And it's refurbishing the plants in Ontario. It is ahead of schedule and on budget.
Which is crazy.
But I just wanted to finish on the small modular reactor. So it's not just you're right there. The small modular reactors are causing us to get into multiple provinces, but also multiple markets. And so we're engaged with First Nations communities right now as an industry, looking at using micro reactors to replace, in these off-grid communities, to replace these diesel generators, which are, just not great for energy security or sovereignty and self-sustainability issues. We're looking at the application of small modular reactors in mining operations, creating steel, creating cement, creating fertilizers, and so there's applications for small modular reactors, not just in electricity, but in all of these other places that are producing a lot of pollution. And I think we're going to see those high temperature heat, small modular reactors, replacing fossil fuels in heavy industry and natural resource sectors. That's really important.
We're taking nuclear on the road, essentially. That is what this technology will allow us to do, is drop it in places that would be unrealistic
Exactly.
to generations before. But we have now taken that where we can really scale up in a meaningful way across the
Exactly.
country.
Yeah, starting very,
incredible.
very small and then making it
Yeah.
any size you want, including some new large reactors that are being looked at right now in Canada as well. Yeah.
That's right. Well, that's very interesting. So I think we'll wrap up there. We've covered a lot of territory. Thank you. I was first venture into the podcast world. I was a little nervous, but I have to say this was very fun, and I
really enjoyed that. Feel very honored to be your first guest. So
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it was a wonderful time. And again, we're up at the Canadian Nuclear Association conference, which is your show. So for you to take time and do this with us, amazing. And your team for all of the work that they did in coordinating.
Great team.
I really appreciate it.
Great
And
team.
one last thing. So for our viewers who are now so intrigued about nuclear, what is a good next step that they could go? Are there any resources or tools maybe on your site that they could go to kind of peel back the layers a little bit more on what we've talked about today?
I think starting at our website is a great idea.
I thought you might think that's a good start.
www.cna.ca. So cna.ca.
And we'll link it. We'll make sure there's a
it's a
link.
great place to start.
And there's a toolkit on, what do you call it? You have a resource guide that really breaks it down beautifully.
So I think that's a good starting point. But I mean, really, what we need is for people to take the time, look through things like this wonderful podcast, to understand the real facts behind nuclear, and also the real challenges that we're facing as a nation and a world, to see how these things marry. And they're going to discover that nuclear is just such an incredible Canadian asset that we're really lucky to have it right now. Yeah.
I think it really is a superhero industry. And the more you learn, the more impressive it becomes, which of course we will say because we're in the industry, but it really is true. That's a genuine statement, the work that we do. But thank you so much. And thank you to the audience for joining in and having the conversation with us. If you have enjoyed this one, my next chapter, as we have referenced, is going to be me talking about baseload power, consistent power that we all need and love for the lifestyles that we live, with Mike Renchek, who is the president and CEO of Bruce Power. So thank you again, and this has been Splitting Atoms.